Hi guys, welcome to Multiverse. Today I will make something that I don't usually make. I will make a top 10 video. And this video will be a top 10 best video games of all time forever. Basically, some of you guys have been asking if what kind of game I like to play and if I play other games in DC Universe Online. I almost made a video talking about my gaming history, but then I came to realize that it would require a pretty long video to talk about all the video games that I've played throughout the years. So I decided to make a top 10 video instead in order to try to keep it as a shorter video. I will probably make a gaming video at some point talking about a whole bunch of games that I've played through the years. But today let's start with a top 10 of the top 10 best video games forever. Number 10 is a game called Arcanum of Steamworks and Magic Obscura. I loved this game. Sadly, this game could be a lot higher on the list. Sadly, this game had quite a few flaws. The biggest flaw was there was quite a lot of bugs in the game at release. Heck, this game was pretty much unplayable unless you installed the day one patch. Also, sadly, the way the game was made, they tried to make it so that you could play either in real time or that you could play it turn-based. And sadly, the game was pretty much unplayable in real time. And sadly, if you played the game turn-based, it was a little bit easy whenever you went into battle. So combat was a bit messed up, whether you played in real time or in turn-based, but the world building was awesome. Basically, this was a world where you had magic coexisting with a steampunk kind of world. So it was pretty much a mixture of steampunk with some magic incorporated into it. And the story was pretty good. Yeah, you had a really good story, some really good character interactions, some really good dialogues, and also the way you could customize your character. If you gave high intelligence to your character, it made a huge difference in the dialogues options you could have. And if you gave low intelligence to your character, also you could see quite an impact on the dialogue options your character would have. So the mixture of magic and steampunk made this game quite unique. So you had your typical races like elves and dwarves that you have in most fantasy games, but with the unique addition that you could actually craft guns, and you could have your character use guns if you wanted to. Sadly, again, it was poorly balanced in the sense that guns were much less effective than, let's say, a sword and an axe, because trying to find all the components you needed to be able to craft not just your gun, but the bullets you needed to use your gun, that was a bit of an issue. But again, despite its flaws, the world building and the story and the dialogue options and the dialogues with the NPCs more than made up for any flaws that the game has. So if you never tried this game and you get the chance to be able to try it out, I would strongly suggest you give this a try. Obviously, you have to be a big role-playing fan in order to be able to enjoy this game. And number 9 is Destiny. You guys may probably know by now, I'm not a big shooter fan, so the fact that this game is even on the list is pretty much a small miracle. This is pretty much the only shooter game that I really played. I tried quite a few shooter games in the past, but I never played the shooter games all that much. I guess part of it is that the very first times I tried to play shooter games with some of my quote-unquote friends, and sadly my friends did seem to think that it was quite funny to one-shot my character as soon as it was spawned, so it pretty much turned me off from shooter games for quite a bit. There's a few things that changed that. Basically, at some point I started playing Fallout 3, which I know may be funny to mention. Fallout 3 is not really a shooter game, at least not at first, but at some point, once I got a lot of hours of playtime playing Fallout 3, I could actually play the game in real time and not use the VAT system all the time. And that pretty much was the first stepping stone allowing me to be able to play an actual shooter game. The other stepping stone would be DC Universe Online. Basically, I played a lot of PvP in DC Universe Online, and I was able to learn how to play PvP thanks to DC Universe Online. So I was able to take whatever I had learned from Fallout 3 and whatever I had learned from DC Universe Online, mush all that together, and it allowed me to be able to play Destiny and even play PvP with Destiny. And it allowed me to be able to play Destiny without getting creamed all the time by enemy players. Visually, I really enjoyed how this game looked. I thought the locations looked good, I thought the visual effects looked good, and even the character models looked pretty good. The one thing I didn't really like was how little customization there was for the look of your character. That's a minor gripe, but overall that was a pretty good game, and I really enjoyed myself. One of the thing I enjoyed was exploring the maps, exploring the various areas. Although sadly, you quickly realize that the maps aren't that big in Destiny. There's quite a few bits that you can explore, but it's not as big as you would think at first. I thought the way you played the game, and also especially the controls, were pretty intuitive. It may seem a bit silly, but there's a lot of games where the controls are very clunky, but Destiny was pretty easy to start playing right from the start. Usually I play rogue type characters, so the very first character I played in Destiny was the Hunter, but I came to realize that the Titan was actually pretty fun to play, and in PvP, the Titan with the Fire Hammer, I forget the actual name, that character was awesome to play in PvP. Taking down enemy players with your Fire Hammer was all kinds of satisfying. So overall, it was a really good game. The story was pretty fun to discover, even though there wasn't that much of it. That's probably one of the biggest complaints that people have with Destiny. There wasn't that much content, but whatever was there was well done. And overall, the game was fun from the very first day. Number 8 is Diablo 2. Please don't stop the video just yet. I know that a lot of people will probably be screaming blasphemy, but this is the very first game I played on computers, on PC. I bought my first PC for Christmas of 2001. It was a gift I made to myself. It was my very first PC forever. It was a laptop that today would not be as powerful as most smartphones. But way back when, I purchased that my first PC in order to be able to use it for work, basically. And then a friend decided to give me, I have a friend who for some reason had an extra copy of Diablo 2, so he gave me his extra copy just to try it out, and I was hooked. Basically, I bought my PC for Christmas, and I spent my whole 2 weeks of Christmas vacation doing nothing but playing Diablo 2, basically from morning until I would fall asleep. So I would wake up, I would fall asleep with my laptop on me. I would wake up the next morning, and the first thing I would do as waking up would be start to play until I would fall asleep again. I would only stop to go to the bathroom or to eat a little bit. So I had a lot of fun playing that game, and the cinematics at the time were probably some of the best cinematics we had in games. It was basically a tiny movie that you could enjoy between each chapter of the game. And also I fell in love with the Necromancer character. I pretty much was doing with my Necromancer the opposite of what anyone else in the world were doing. Everyone playing a Necromancer would try to have as much strength as possible, to have the biggest armor possible, and then they would go into battle in melee with like their bone club. I did the opposite. I would give my character the highest strength I could. I would give him a bow. He would use whatever armor he could use. Basically, what I would do is that all my points were going into dexterity, and all my magic points would go into summoning skeletons. So anything that would make my skeleton stronger, that's where I would put my points. So basically, I would summon an army of skeleton, and I would use my bow from afar to support my skeleton. And when a skeleton would fall, I would raise one back right away. And people were calling me crazy when I was doing that. In their minds, a skeleton were squishy, and also at some point you run out of corpses, because people were using abilities like Corpse Explosion to pretty much do a lot of damage to enemies by having all the corpses in a room explode and do a bunch of damage. I was never doing that. All I was doing was summoning skeletons. So whatever enemy that would fall down, I would raise him back as a skeleton. So any fallen enemies would become a skeleton for me. And also, my skeletons were so strong that they were even stronger than my golems, because again, I would put all my points into skeletons, making each skeleton a very powerful NPC, and I could summon a small army of them. So it was awesome. And after playing Diablo 2, I had to look for other games, other similar games, which I would find a bit later. You'll see some of those in the list, one which will be the very next one I'm going to talk about. Number 7 will be Icewind Dale. I guess I could include Icewind Dale 2 into the mix and consider them more or less one game, even though Icewind Dale 2 was a bit different from Icewind Dale. But overall, Icewind Dale was a very fun, what I call a dungeon crawl. Well, I'm not just the only one calling that, but basically, Icewind Dale was a fun dungeon crawl. You create a party of adventurers, and you go on an adventure where you have to crawl through dungeons and fight a lot of evil minions. Also, it wouldn't hurt that it was a Dungeons and Dragon game. I'm a big Dungeons and Dragon fan, so being able to play Dungeons and Dragon on the computer was awesome. As I mentioned, after Diablo 2, I was looking for more similar games, and I found one which was even better than Diablo 2, which you'll see later down in the list. And after that game, I was still looking for more similar games, and Icewind Dale is the game that I played after that. And again, I really enjoyed being able to create your characters. Actually, in this case, you create the whole group. So you create a party of adventurer that goes to explore the 10 towns and basically the whole area of Icewind Dale, at least within the context of that game. I had read the Icewind Dale trilogy of books at least a decade and a half before I played the Icewind Dale game, so it was really fun to explore the 10 towns. I thought I would see more NPCs, more characters that I had actually met in the book, but I think the Icewind Dale game happened like 140 something years before the books, so that's probably why I didn't meet any of those characters, although I would meet some of those characters in some other games later down the line. So if you ever heard about the infamous drow Drizzt Do'Urden, or the dwarf Bruenor Battlehammer, or of Wulfgar the Barbarian, these people were in the Icewind Dale trilogy of books, and that's where the game pretty much happens. But again, I think it's 100 years or a little more than 100 years before the events of the book. So if you enjoyed role-playing game, you may still enjoy Icewind Dale, although it was more of a dungeon crawl where you explore dungeons and fight enemies than an actual role-playing game, I would say. But if you love dungeon crawls, that game is for you. Number 6 is Fallout. I guess you could lump in Fallout 2, but I thought Fallout was a bit better than Fallout 2, but Fallout 2 was pretty darn good as well. Some of the best features of Fallout was the world building. Basically, you're in a post-apocalyptic world, but it's a post-apocalypse that happens if the nuclear war had started in the 60s. So basically, a lot of the technology is very retro. It's technology straight out from the 60s, but in a future world where this is like, I think, 100 years after some sort of nuclear war, and after spending all that time in a Fallout bunker, a Fallout shelter, you have to go out into the outside world to explore and try to find some missing parts that you need in order to be able to repair the vault where you're coming from. But holy crap, the world was very fun to explore. You basically had freedom, total freedom to go wherever you wanted, and you could pretty much do whatever you wanted. So you had free reins to pretty much play the character you wanted the way you wanted to play it. And the interaction with the NPCs were awesome. You had some rich interaction with the NPCs, with some rich dialogues, which made this game with stronger NPCs and a stronger story than a lot of games that came afterwards. We often see people complain about certain games and thinking that the next game will be better. Sadly, no. Some really older games like Fallout have a really strong story that somehow modern games cannot seem to be able to match. So if you like a really strong story, and if you like good world building, and if you like to be able to explore the world, Fallout is for you. Obviously, the graphics are dated compared to modern games, but if you don't mind older graphics, and if you like rich story with rich characters, you have to try Fallout. If you did not play Fallout just yet, give it a try. You may discover something awesome. Number 5 is The Last of Us. Speaking of rich story and rich characters and rich dialogues and rich NPCs, this game is way up there. The story and the richness of the character is what makes this game. Sadly, this game could be higher on the list, but it has quite a few flaws, especially in the gameplay department. Sadly, there were times where you knew that you had to open the door, and you had to sometimes find the exact pixel where to click in order to be able to get the option to, let's say, use a door or use a ladder or something like that. So sometimes you would look for let's say, where to go next. You would pass your cursor everywhere on the map. You wouldn't find where to go next. And for some reason, 5 minutes later, you would put the cursor someplace where you had already looked before, and lo and behold, that's where you had to go. Somehow, that happened all the time. Which is sadly is why I only played this game once. The sad reason for that is that when I tried to play it a second time, I ended up, there was a place where I had to push a container, then get on top of the container, and then grab a ladder to be able to climb to where I had to go. Sadly, when I pushed the container, I pushed it a tiny bit too much to the right, and then the container got locked there. I could not pull it back. It stayed into place, and it was just a little too much to the right that I could not grab the ladder where I had to go to. So that was the last straw, and I uninstalled the game. But I still have some fun memories. The story, the world building, and the characters, especially the characters of Ellie, the little girl that you see to the left, all of that was what made this game great. The combat was probably the weakest part of the game. At first, when you don't quite know what to do, the combat is really, really tough. And also, you get as soon as the zombies touch you, you're dead. It's like a one-shot kill. So you really have to make sure that no zombies will be able to touch you. So at first, when you don't really know what you're doing, combat is freaking difficult. But once you figure out how combat actually works and how the game actually works, then combat gets much, much easier. But again, combat doesn't really matter. What makes this game great is the great story and the great characters. I swear to you, by the time you finish playing this game, you will grow very, very attached to the little girl who's following you through this world. I was going to say through this open world, but I guess that's another minus for the game, is that it's not really an open world. You pretty much have only one track to follow to go from point A to point Z. And sadly, it could use a bit more exploration. It could use a bit more freedom in how you can explore the world, but that's a minor gripe. Again, the story is so good and so strong that all that other stuff doesn't really matter. Number 4 is Fallout 3. Yeah, I've already talked about Fallout, but Fallout 3 is different enough from Fallout 1 and 2 that I think it can count as a different game overall. Again, Fallout 3, the story is awesome. I guess there isn't that much of it technically, but you're into pretty much an open sandbox. You can pretty much go anywhere you want. So much so that the very first time I played the game, I had no idea how to read the quest tracker, so I ended up going in the wrong direction, and I ended up going around the map like 3 times before I even realized that there was a main quest, and before I even finished the main quest. So I explored the wasteland from top to bottom before I even then went to the town where I was supposed to go to be able to complete the main quest. Also, there's this awesome bit where you can either, spoiler alert, you can either help the town where you're going to, or you can decide to blow it up and be an evil meanie. So whichever you decide to do pretty much influences the rest of the game afterwards. And as I mentioned previously, I'm not really big on shooter games, and technically this is not really a shooter game. But so at first I was using, there's a system called the VAT system. Basically, you can pause the game, decide what action you're going to take, and then keep on playing after that. And at first I was using it extensively, but after playing it for quite a while, like, as I mentioned, I went around the map like 3 times, if not more. So by the time at some point I was getting really used to playing this game. So at some point I did not even need to use the VAT system anymore. I would play in real time, and it was glorious. And that's pretty much how I kind of learned how to play a shooter game. So the strong point with this game were the story, the world building, the freedom to be able to almost do pretty much anything you wanted. Those are pretty much the reasons why I really enjoyed this game. Also, the landscape. I would love to just walk around at the landscape, look at the landscape, look at the moon, at the sky, at the whole world that had been built for us to be able to interact with. So this game offered a lot of freedom that not many games actually offer you. So for that alone, this game was worth playing, and it was worth being on this list. Number 3 is Dragon Age Origins. Some of the games you will see later in the list. After playing those games, I was pretty much looking for more of the same, and this pretty much ended up being what I was looking for. I was looking for pretty much the next generation of games that would be as good as those other games, but that would be like one step further with like better graphics or stuff like that. Basically, we had a game called Neverwinter Nights, which should have been that game, but sadly, the only real good thing about Neverwinter Nights was the character creation and the fact that it was 3D graphics. But everything else, the story, the NPC interactions, that was very disappointing from Neverwinter Nights. But luckily, we got Dragon Age, which was everything I was looking for. With Dragon Age Origins, you had some freedom to customize your character, but even better, depending on which character you would create, you would have a completely different start to the game, a completely different origin, as the name says. So if you created a dwarf, you would start in the underground as a dwarf slave. If you created an elf, you could start as a wood elf living in the woods, or as an elf living in the cities, again being some sort of slave. If you created a human, you would start as a noble from a noble family. If you created a human mage, then you would start as one of the mages in the Tower of Sorcery. It was awesome. Usually I play games as a rogue character. So when I started playing Dragon Age Origins, obviously I created like an elf rogue. And then I played around with the various characters we could create. I created a human warrior, and then I created a human mage. And once I created my human mage, I could not stop playing that character. So my very first playthrough was with a human mage character, and it was glorious. One of the world that I love in Dungeons & Dragons is a world called Dragonlance. And one of my favorite character in Dragonlance was the mage, the evil mage, Raceland Majeur. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but anyways. And in Dragonlance, you have those towers of high sorcery where mages have to go in order to be trained as mages, and that's what it reminded me of. And it reminded me of it in a good way, not as a cheap copy. So I loved being a mage who was in the mage of high sorcery, and you had to learn about magic. And you had to survive. You had your test where they would test you to become a mage, and you had to survive your test. And after the test, a whole bunch of stuff would happen, and you would learn about blood magic. And holy crap, the story was so awesome that I could not keep on playing. I could not stop playing. I kept on playing and playing and playing, and that's how I loved it so much. And later on, even though my character was already a mage, there was this character called Morrigan who also was a mage. And so I ended up in a group with two mages because I loved the character of Morrigan so much. I'll talk about the NPCs in a bit, but I guess I had a bit of a crush on Morrigan, you could say. But I really enjoyed that character so much so that I ended up having a group where there was two mage, and the other two were a rogue and a Templar. Well, it actually was a fighter, but I think I turned him into a Templar. But for Morrigan, holy crap, did I love this character. So even though my character was already a mage, and it would probably have made more sense to have, let's say, another fighter in the group, I decided to go ahead and keep Morrigan instead, because I enjoyed that character so much. And that's one of the great things about Dragon Age, either Dragon Age Origin, or even Dragon Age 2, or even Dragon Age 3. The NPCs, the NPCs were really well developed. They all had some nice backstory. And not just the NPCs that joined your group. There's this character called Duncan who pretty much recruits you early on in the game, and he recruits you to become what they called a Grey Warden. And holy crap, you don't see that character all that much, but the character is so well fleshed out, and he's so likable that you grew attached to the character very quickly. But sadly, what has to happen happened, and poor Duncan doesn't make it very far into the game, sadly. Heck, one of the NPCs you can have in your group is a dog, a big war dog. And holy crap, is he awesome. And there's a few things with your dog, like there's some chew toys you can get to your dog, but there's also some places in the maps that if you go click on those places, like quote unquote, let's say a tree where your dog would mark his territory, it gives the dogs a few bonuses. Another NPC that you have is a character called Shale, which is a big rock golem, which again brings something pretty awesome to your group. I could go like that about all the characters. All the characters in this game are pretty awesome, and even the characters in Dragon Age 2 and 3 are pretty good. Sadly for Dragon Age 2, although there's some NPCs, again the backstory and the NPCs are still well done, they decided to go into a completely different direction with Dragon Age 2, which turned it into a completely different game. It felt completely disconnected from Dragon Age Origins, even though technically it was the continuation of the same story. And sadly, they did that also with Dragon Age 3. Although Dragon Age 3 was a bit of an improvement compared to Dragon Age 2, but still the harm was done, and Dragon Age 1, 2, and 3 are very, very different games from each other. So sadly, you don't really feel like you're playing the same game from Dragon Age 1 to Dragon Age 2 to Dragon Age 3. The best example I can think of how Dragon Age 2 was pretty much a lesser version of Dragon Age was the troll. When you're in Dragon Age, the very first time you face a troll, holy crap, is it a frightening sight. Your group is pretty much a low-level party, and you end up facing this massive beast, which is pretty dangerous. If you're not careful, he wipes your team. It's that simple. Uh, so whatever the very first time you see the troll in Dragon Age Origin, holy crap, it's very terrifying. Sadly, afterwards in Dragon Age 2, the troll became a joke almost. Sadly, the troll, or is it an ogre? Anyway, troll or ogre, that creature in Dragon Age 2 is only like part of the very, very start of the game. It's pretty much part of the tutorial where you kind of learn how to fight enemies. And sadly, your character pretty much wipes the floor with the poor little troll ogre without much effort. Which pretty much shows you how the game went downhill a bit with Dragon Age 2, in the sense that this big, awesome, terrifying creature that could wipe out your whole party, once you encounter it in Dragon Age 2, you wipe the floor with it to show how powerful your character is, which was a bit of a disappointment. And I loved Dragon Age so much that I bought it on PC and played it on PC, and then later on I bought it again for PS3, and I played it again. I don't know how many times on PS3. That's how much I really enjoyed Dragon Age Origins. Number 9 is the legendary Baldur's Gate. I've mixed Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2 together because technically it's one very, very long game. If you play it from beginning to end, like if you start with Baldur's Gate, then the Baldur's Gate expansion, Tales of the Sword Coast, then Baldur's Gate 2, and then Baldur's Gate 2 Throne of Baal, you end up with a massive game that's like 3, 4, 500 hours of gameplay with the very same character. Like if you play through Baldur's Gate and explore every corner that you can, and if you take your sweet time to explore everything, to fight every enemy, to clear out every map and every dungeons, you can end up with a few hundred hours of gameplay playing Baldur's Gate. I've played this game so much, especially Baldur's Gate 2, that I had to buy multiple copies of Baldur's Gate 2 because I would wear out the play disc very quickly. For some reason, I'm not sure why, there was this, I guess, copy protection, so very often the play disc kept on spinning and spinning and spinning. Either that or maybe the game had to read at least some data from the play disk. Even if you did a full install, somehow the disk kept on spinning and the CD drive for some reason. So thanks to that, I ended up pretty much using up the play disk and had to purchase the game again in order to be able to keep on playing it. And I played this game so much. I tried pretty much every party combination you can think of. I played a whole bunch of mods with this game. It's with this game that I discovered how to install mods. So I would look for basically more content in order to be able to play. That's the game also that after playing Baldur's Gate, I was looking for more games of the same. So I discovered Icewind Dale, and then as I kept on looking and looking, I discovered Dragon Age. There was also Neverwinter. Sadly, Neverwinter was not really as good as we hoped. There were other games also, Temple of Elemental Evil. Overall, Temple of Elemental Evil could have been a fun game. Actually, it had a fun game, but the story was a bit lacking. They basically, it's as if they only took the Temple of Elemental module as it was, and they forgot to add more meat to the story. They forgot to add to what was already there to be able to make it a full game. But also there was a whole bunch of production problems with Temple of Elemental Evil, so it's easy to understand why a lot of things went wrong with that. I also played Pool of Radiance 2 as I was looking for more games like Baldur's Gate. And obviously you already saw I played Arcanum because of that. I played, I already mentioned Icewind Dale. So basically after playing Baldur's Gate, I was looking for more games, more similar games that offered that role-playing that Baldur's Gate offered. And of course, it was a Dungeons and Dragon game, which, as you guys know by now, I'm a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons. So this allowed me to be able to play Dungeons and Dragons as much as I wanted on my own. Sadly, as you know, one of the drawbacks of playing Dungeons & Dragons is that you need a group of people in order to be able to play. But thanks to Baldur's Gate, I could play Dungeons and Dragons as much as I wanted to without needing anyone else. Sometimes we would play the game in multiplayers. At some point, we had some LAN party when we would gather a whole bunch of guys together with their computers in one room. We would hook it all up together, and we would play a whole bunch of games. And one of those games would be sometimes Baldur's Gate. We played the first game in multiplayer. We played a tiny part of the start of the second game. Sadly, as I mentioned, getting a group together sometimes is not very easy. So completing Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2 with a full group was very challenging, so we didn't really manage to do it. We played the first one, we played a bit of the second one, and that pretty much was it. Which is why it was so awesome that we were actually able to play Baldur's Gate by ourselves if we wanted to. So again, if I couldn't find players to play Dungeons and Dragons with, no problem, I would log into Baldur's Gate, and that's what I would play. And holy crap, did I play it. And I played a lot of mods. I played the Darkest Day mod. I played a whole bunch of mods that were added as years went by. But obviously, it's not the same as playing a new game. So sooner or later, I stopped playing Baldur's Gate for a few years. Although now there's the Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition. So obviously, I purchased Baldur's Gate again with the Enhanced Edition. And whenever I get the chance, I try to play it at least a bit. So Baldur's Gate was a great game that I really enjoyed, and again afterwards I was looking for similar games in order to be able to enjoy those as well. And I already mentioned some of those games in this top 10 list, but then the very next game at the very top of the list also came because I was looking for more games like Baldur's Gate. And number 1 on the list is Planescape Torment. Holy crap, did I enjoy this game. And even though it's a single player game, I actually was able to play it in multiplayer with one of my friends in a roundabout ways. Basically what we would do is that I would be at home playing the game. I would have my phone with me. My friend would have his phone playing the game at his place. And we would play the game together. Sort of. As I mentioned, I often play rogues in games, and my friend at the time was playing Planescape, but as a fighter. And as a fighter, obviously, there's a lot of times where he could not unlock certain chests and stuff like that, or he could not see traps. So what we would do is that on my end, I would be playing as a rogue. I would unlock doors, unlock traps, and all that good stuff. And then I would tell him what to do. Like if I saw a chest that was booby trapped, I would tell him, don't touch that chest. It's booby trapped. Or I would tell him I would open the chest and I would tell him what was in the chest to let him know if it was worth it to try to force the chest open and risk taking some damage with his character. So basically over the phone, each playing our own game, but each collaborating together to help us out, sometimes with puzzles, sometimes with, again, with traps or with chests that were locked or stuff like that. Ironically enough, from what I understand, Planescape Torment came out, I think, a bit before Baldur's Gate, or at the same time as the first Baldur's Gate, but I discovered Planescape only after Baldur's Gate 2, and it was awesome. And it might as well be because the story in Planescape Torment was by far its strongest point. The story and the NPCs, the non-player characters, not only that you interacted with, but those that you could also actually get in your group. As you can see, you had like a floating skull called Morty, who was a fighter. You had Ignis, which was a mage that was on fire. You had the Valor, which was like an anti-paladin that had fallen or something. You had Hannah, which was a very charming rogue. You had Dakun, which was a monk, I think. I forget. It's been a while since I played the game. I think Dakin was a monk. So the game had a really intriguing story. It had a great atmosphere. The atmosphere and the music, holy crap. You could lose yourself into the game, and also the role you could role play if you wanted to. If you gave high intelligence and high wisdom to your character, it would unlock you some dialogue option that you wouldn't have otherwise. And the same as if you didn't have high intelligence, yeah, if you had low intelligence, again there were dialogue options that you wouldn't have with your character. So the story, the mood and atmosphere, and the personality of the NPCs is what made this game great. And after spending many hours with those characters, by the time you reach the end of the story, I guarantee you're going to be a tiny bit sad. There's a few times while I was playing the game where it was pulling on my heartstring a little bit. And the final scene, holy crap. Basically there's a final scene, there's a cinematic at the very end of the game as you complete the game. and I can't even find a word to describe how awesome that end scene actually was. I guess you could look it up on YouTube, but it won't be quite the same. It won't be quite the same as when you spent 30, 40, 50 hours. I forget how long I played this game, but it won't be the same as after playing, let's say, 30 hours in this game and then reaching that final destination at the end of the game. And sadly, I remember thinking foolishly at the time, like after playing such a strong story, such a well-crafted story in Planescape Torment, obviously other games that would come after cannot do any less than what Torment did. They had to make a story as good, if not better, than what Torment did. But sadly, Torment raised the bar so much that it was very hard after Torment to find a game that had a story that was even half as good as what Torment offered. Again, I know that a lot of people sometimes think that future games will automatically be better than previous games because they were done after those games. But I guarantee you, there's quite a few games that were done in the past that are much better than some of the more recent game that we got. Yes, sometimes the graphics may not be quite as advanced or as modern, but very often the stories are very well crafted, which is, I guess it's a skill that seems to be getting lost slowly and surely. It almost seems sometimes as if crafting strong stories, well crafted stories, is almost becoming a lost art. There's probably a few ways to try to explain that. Basically, I guess most game designers rely a little too much on graphics, that they forget that the story is as important, if not more important, than the graphics. Sometimes it's as if all the resources are spent on trying to make good graphics, and they forget to actually put resources in crafting a strong, solid story. But maybe it's just me. So that's pretty much it for my top 10 of the best video games forever that were ever done. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of you guys expected DC Universe Online to be at the top of the list, and technically it probably should have been, but I purposefully decided to leave DC Universe Online out of the list because right now you have over 1,000 DC Universe Online videos to let you know that I really enjoy DC Universe Online. So I thought there was no point to put DC Universe Online in this list, seeing how you guys already know by now that I really love playing DC Universe Online. And obviously, there's a lot of honorable mention that could have been mentioned in this video. Sadly, this video is starting to be long already, so I didn't really talk about some of the honorable mentions, so I will just mention a few here right now. Games like Neverwinter Nights, Dragon's Dogma, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars Battlefront, Dungeon Siege, Lord of the Rings Online, Dungeons and Dragons Online, Neverwinter, not Neverwinter Nights, Neverwinter. Heroes of Might and Magic, World of Warcraft 3, or even some obscure game like Prince of Quinn or Prince of Jin. I never know how to properly pronounce that. So obviously there's a lot of other games I could have talked about, which is why I decided to focus on a top 10 as opposed to talking about all the games that I enjoy playing, in the hope of trying to keep it a little bit like a shorter video. Sadly, I failed miserably to keep this being a short video, but I will probably try to make a follow-up video talking about some other games that aren't featured on this list, or I could even make a video to talk about a single game on this list and to talk about it in a lot more details than I did in this video. So that's going to be pretty much it for now, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to ask so in the comment section down below. I usually do everything I can to be able to answer your questions. So as always, guys, thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.